introduce our second speaker, Prof. Dr. Piyush Sharma. Prof. Piyush P. Sharma has more than 30 years overall professional experience, divided almost equally between industry and academia. He joined the School of Marketing at Curtin University in January 2014 and has served as a member of the Strategic Review Board of the Faculty of Business and Law. He is currently a co-leader of the Customer Experience Research Group, Innovation Research Hub, and Navigating Intercultural Experience NICE platform in the School of Management and Marketing. He also served as a member of Australia Research Council, ABRIC College of Experts, and Associate Editor Marketing for Journal of Business Research. He is also a member of the Editorial Review Board for numerous distinguished journals. He has also served as co-editor for journals like Marketing Intelligence and Planning, to name a few, and a regional editor for Asia for Journal of Knowledge Management. Professor Sharma is ranked among the top 2% researcher in the world across all fields of research, among the top 60 business researchers in the global ranking based on publications in ABRIC journal since 2013. He also is recognized as the only rising star from marketing area among Australia's top 40 researchers across all disciplines in 2019. He is also the most popular author from the Faculty of Business and Law at Curtin University since 2016, with more than 100,000 downloads and views. His research covers service and international marketing, cross-cultural consumer behavior, self-regulation and regulatory failure, branding and marketing strategy, marketing finance interface, organizational behavior, and management, among others. He has published more than 100 peer-reviewed articles in top international journals and presented at papers more than 100 international conferences and delivered keynote speeches and invited talks and conducted research workshops all around the world. He is also advises and works very closely with many private and public and not only for-profit industry partners in the community care, education, higher education, finance, and also healthcare services and international business sector in Australia and overseas. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure. Let us give a warm round of applause to our Professor P. Sharma with the topic From Self-Service Technology to Emerging Digital Technologies, the Changing Face of Retail Shopping.
Hi. Selamat pagi. Good morning. It's nice to be here, and thanks for that very nice introduction. I'm going to share my slides now. Are you able to see my slides?
Yes, Prof.
Okay, great. And are you able to hear me clearly?
Yes, Prof.
Okay, great. So good morning again, everyone. So I'm calling from Perth, Australia. It's quite cold here, so the weather there is quite different in Malaysia. I've lived in Singapore for many years, and I've visited Malaysian universities many times. So I'm quite happy to be here. So today I'm going to talk about one of my research interests, which is in technology area. So my background is electrical engineering. That was my undergraduate degree. Although then I moved to marketing, and I've been in marketing for the last 25, 30 years. So let me straight away jump into the agenda for my talk today. We'll talk a little bit about what are these new self-service technologies that have been around for many years now, and how do they affect businesses and consumers? What are some of the pros and cons of using technology, and in particular self-service technology? And what are some of the recent trends and research findings? And also looking at do the businesses do they realize that these SSTs can also be abused or misused or overused, and are they doing anything about it? And also, can the consumers, we as consumers, can we do anything about the self-service technology? And lastly, we're going to look at some of the new emerging technologies that are now shaping the future of self-service technology in retail shopping. So I will talk for about 30 minutes, 25 to 30 minutes, and then we'll have maybe 10 or 15 minutes for some questions at the end. So let's start by looking at self-service technologies. We all experience these technologies. They're all around us, starting with the ATMs, which came 50 or 60 years ago, airline check-in, hotel check-in, automatic car rentals. You can even get your blood pressure tested by yourself. So there's a wide range of these self-service technologies. Many a times they are so common that we don't even realize that we are using these self-service technologies. They've become a part of our life. Even things like online banking, online shopping, all of that. And especially during COVID, I think we all have got used to doing a lot of things online by ourselves. And that's kind of also, made these self-service technologies as a very integral part of our day-to-day life. Now, conceptually, the role of technology in the services has been looked at for many, many years. So I'm not sure many of you may be familiar with the services triangle, which has companies, employees, and the customers. In 2000, Professor Parasuraman introduced the idea of technology. He said this is not a triangle, it's actually a pyramid. And technology is going to sit at the middle. And technology is then going to mediate all these relationships. So whether the companies interact with their employees, it'll go through technology. Companies and customers will go through technology, and also employees to customers, which is frontline service employees, call centers, and so on. And it is so interesting that what he predicted in the year 2000 has now today become a reality. Most of us now cannot live without our mobile phones. Most of us we have email, text messaging, WhatsApp on our mobile phones. So everything that we do is now being mediated by technology. So some of my colleagues, Professor Ramaseshan and Kingshot, they took this idea forward a few years ago, and they said that technology is also not going to be used by the channel members. So they created this a square pyramid. So there is a base where it's not just the firms and the customers and their employees, but even their channel partners now. So distributors, agents, franchisees, even they are now being brought into the technology fold, and they are continuously they're using technology to interact with the firm, with the employees, and also with the customers. So here are some examples which all of us are familiar with. Nowadays, some of you, if you're lucky enough, you'll go to an airport, and most of us haven't, taken any flights for 2 years. But you will see this scene where now they have very few staff, and there are these machines. So you need to go and put in your PNR number, or you need to scan your your ticket, your QR code, which all of us have now become used to thanks to COVID. Scanning wherever we go in the shopping malls, and so on. Interestingly, there is the opposite, which is the self-checkout, which is the other example. Now, I'm not sure if it is very common in Malaysia, but it's very common in many parts of the world, where you go and you check out your own shopping. So whether it's groceries, yesterday I went shopping in a departmental store called Kmart, and I could check out my own items. So I didn't have to queue up. I saved time, and I could scan my card. I got my loyalty points. So everything was in my control. Now, the interesting thing is that not every consumer would appreciate this idea of doing things themselves. So when I've been doing research in this area for the last 10, 15 years, and when I talk to some consumers, typically those consumers who are older, who are less educated or those who come from non-urban backgrounds, you find that they think that it's the firms, the service companies, they are actually pushing their work onto us. Why should I do this? It is their job. I'm paying them to do it. So there's a two schools of thought. There are people who are absolutely they love this idea of having the freedom and the independence to do everything themselves. So they can check in for their flight at home, and they just go to the airport and they don't even need to queue up. But then there are others who require more help. So there are people who are not very ready to embrace these technologies. So if you look at, especially in the context of shopping, these self-checkout machines, they've been around for almost a couple of decades. And the whole idea was that these supermarket chains, they wanted to reduce their cost and also improve their efficiency. And they said, because there used to be long queues in the supermarkets and the grocery stores, so they introduced these machines. And now they still have those the staff. So you have both. You have the number of counters where there's a staff who will scan the items for you and that they will bill the cashiers, but they also have a number of machines now. So it's essentially giving more choice to the consumers. Now, interestingly, if you look at some of the recent research, we find that, as I said, not everybody likes this whole idea of using machines. So, for example, in UK, there are many UK shoppers that they claim that they have never used self-checkout machines. They're never going to use it. By contrast, in Australia, shoppers are very well satisfied. We have self-checkout machines in almost every outlet, every supermarket, and they're quite confident. Similarly, for online shopping, once again, we find very contrasting results. So, for example, in UK, half of the consumers, more than half, 55%, claim that they do not use online shopping for groceries, and only 10% say that they always do their grocery shopping online. Whereas in Australia, it's quite the opposite. Now, the reasons could be because UK is pretty densely populated, and they always have some stores, corner stores, 7-Elevens, or any of these other grocery stores, Tesco and others, at their doorstep. So maybe they don't feel the need to go online shopping, and they're quite used to being served by the staff in the store. So they don't also like to use the self-checkout machines. It could be a cultural sort of reason for that. So now this is interesting because COVID-19 has changed consumer behavior everywhere. I'm sure many of you are probably doing research on that topic. I was looking at some of the topics of your presentations later on. And we find that there is a growing trend towards online shopping and also home delivery of groceries, food, many other goods and services. So it will be interesting to see how these technologies will continue to be used, or would there be more adaptation? Even those people who were, initially a little bit hesitant, are they now going to be more comfortable using these technologies? Because COVID has made all of us, use these technologies. It has forced us to use these technologies. So in terms of the potential outcomes, the pros and the cons of SSTs, clearly technology is good. Wherever there used to be long queues, because of this option of self-service, now there are no queues. Of course, if there are issues in terms of like weather or flight delays, then you will still have long queues there. But this is a good solution to a major problem. However, for all those pros, there are also many cons, because technology is as good as its supporting infrastructure, right? So what if the technology fails? What if there is a power breakdown? What if there is an internet shutdown? And those problems happen. We have seen system failures in major European airports, for example, in the last few years, where the whole airport was shut down. Train networks have been shut down. In Sydney, for example, recently we had a major shutdown of all the train systems. So similarly, what if the service process fails, right? So there is technology doesn't work by itself. There is also a human interface. So what if that human interface fails? What if the technology was poorly designed? What if the customers do not know how to use the self-service technology? As I was saying, not all the customers are comfortable using these technologies. And finally, what if customers do not want to use self-service technology, right? I mean, there are lots of, as I said, customers who prefer to be served by the company staff, and they say that it's not my job. Why should I do things which you should be doing? So as you can see, there are clearly two schools of thought. So if you look at in terms of research, researchers have been looking at the role of self-service technologies for last couple of decades. And as we said, that they can enable customers to create some value. That's the positive view. However, SST actually forces customers to co-create value, even those who do not probably want to, or those who are not able to. Interesting implication is for the firms, because they need to now educate the customers in terms of how to use these self-service technologies. Now, all of you who are attending this talk today, in the last 2 years, I'm sure all of you have, like me, struggled converting all your lectures to online mode, learning how to use Collaborate, learning how to use, whatever, software that you use, learning how to use Zoom, WebEx, and, all the different platforms. So employers and firms have to spend a lot of effort and time and money to educate customers how to use it. But it's a good investment, because once you learn, then the next time, maybe, it's easier for you to use those tools. The other thing is that technology evolves, and when technology evolves, then everything else evolves. So the websites change, the mobile apps change, all the platforms change, and that has a cost implication for the firm and also for the customers in terms of their learning experience. The other thing is that technology, by definition, tries to standardize everything. So in those services where there is a great variability, and so then it will become more difficult to have one technology solution. So for example, you can have a call center where there is a human interface, so that when there is some unique needs that some customers will have, then that human person can actually intervene and take over from the machines, because the machine may have very limited options in terms of how to address their problems. And this is where the new technologies like artificial intelligence are coming in, which I will cover a little bit later. Self-service technology, when it fails, if there is no human interface available, then the service recovery becomes very difficult, especially when service failure occurs because of the customer's lack of awareness, lack of knowledge, or lack of interest. In that case, the machine cannot tell them what to do. I mean, the machine can only have a very limited options, which if those people are unable to understand. So like I have a few, friends who are a little bit older than me, and some of them are probably less educated also and have less experience of technology, and they're always complaining, this website is terrible, or this app doesn't work. And then when I have a look at it and I see and I'm able to fix it, but then they say, oh, because you do this every day, so therefore you know better. And I'm sure all of us have similar experiences, with different folks. So basically, firms have to be ready to use these technologies. And all of these, for those of you who are interested in this area, these are all potential research issues. Each of these can be converted into a research question, and then you can probably design a study around those. So I and my colleagues have been doing research in this area for last, as I said, 5-10 years. And we published a few papers, starting off with this article we did with our PhD student from Saudi Arabia, Faisal, which looked at a very interesting context. This was a bank, which is for female customers, and they were trying to experiment with online banking. And so we looked at that this whole idea of service separation, where you don't go into the branch anymore, and you sit at home and then you interact. And we found that a lot of their female customers actually didn't like that, because for them, going to the bank was itself a social occasion. So they could meet with their friends, and they had good relationships with the bank staff, and they used to like to hang around in a nice environment. So, and that's a very interesting view, because it's not just for Saudi Arabia and that context, but maybe in other cultural settings, there is more emphasis played on interpersonal relationships. So using technology may have its limitations in certain contexts. Then next, with my another PhD student, Aswati, we looked at the idea of customer participation, three different types of customer participation, where you can have a mandatory customer participation where you don't give a choice to your customers versus a voluntary participation. So we found that different types of conditions had a very different impact on the customer's well-being in that particular context. And many customers simply lost. I mean, they were unhappy, they were frustrated, and so on. And then we looked at it in different cultural settings. So we looked at we collected data in India and in Australia. And again, we found some very interesting cultural differences. In Australia, we found that people were generally more compliant in terms of using technology, but then they were also more variable. Whereas in India, we found that generally the compliance level were low, but those who complied were very consistent. So again, you are based in Malaysia, and if you are interested in looking at the impact of culture, then you can look around and see if culture actually has any impact on customer participation and their willingness to use these technologies. More recently, we had another, this was actually a special issue of Journal of Business Research that I guest edited with my co-authors. And we looked at the whole idea of customer relationship. I have an automatic light. So that's interesting. We have a self-service technology here in my room, in my office. It automatically goes off if I don't move around. And this is the idea of multi-actor service ecosystem. So, which is basically where you have technology and you have service employees and you have many, channel partners. Once you put all of them into the mix, then what happens to the idea of customer engagement and relationship management? So this was a special issue that we guest edited in 2020. So those of you who are interested in understanding issues around that can probably have a look at that. And this is most recently with my co-author in UK, Akiko. We published this paper in Journal of Retailing and Consumer Services, where we directly compare different types of checkout methods. So we look at the staff checkouts, self-service checkout, and also the online, checkout systems or online shopping. And very interestingly, we found, again, this was a study done in both UK and in Australia. And besides the differences we found in the two countries, we found that in both countries, there is still room for these frontline staff members. We can't do away with them. We can't just replace everybody with machines because many of the customers, they still need that social confidence. They need that social interaction. And many of them actually need that support. The other dark side of self-service technology is that there is also an increasing trend towards customer cheating. So many times customers do not scan all the items. And therefore, these retail companies nowadays, they have cameras, they have staff, which is, they stand around and keep an eye on the customers that they are scanning all the items. They have weighing scales. So you have to keep all the items on the weighing scale. And if it doesn't tally with the number of items that you have mentioned, then, it raises an alarm. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. And in this environment, now we have many new technologies that are coming up. So let's have a quick look at what are some of those technologies and what are some of their own sort of unique challenges. So as we saw that computers, mobile devices, social media, they have been around for many, many years, and we are now kind of all used to using these technologies. However, some of the new technologies that are emerging, like artificial intelligence, virtual reality, Internet of Things, robotics, blockchain, I'm sure all of you have heard of these technologies. And marketers are now looking at all these technologies very, very closely and to see how they can actually be used to improve customer engagement, improve customer experience, and customer satisfaction and eventually, obviously, more profits for them. That's the whole idea of introducing these new technologies, because they come at a great expense. So what we can see is researchers are, already talking about how these technologies are going to absolutely transform the way the way marketers interact with their customers, the way they communicate with them. Even their marketing strategies are going to be very, very different. So I'm sure many of you have heard of Google Glass. Some of you may have seen websites where you can go and you put your picture, and then you can see how you are going to look in different dresses, or how different shoes are going to look with your dress, and so on. So you can click and drag all these different features. So this is now becoming very, very common. All of you are familiar with Alexa or Siri, which are the technology tools that help customers in terms of answering their questions and so on. We now have increasingly we have technology enabled homes and offices where lights, fans, air conditioning turns on and off based on whether what's the temperature conditions or how many people are there in a room. So a lot of these things have been enabled by technologies such as Internet of Things, machine learning, and so on. The other big area is going to be robotics, where all those tasks that do not need a human, action can now be converted to robotics. So it's almost like, what we saw, with the, call centers, where they came out with the IVR, the interactive voice recording systems. So a lot of your questions can actually be answered through that IVR system. And then if you can't, then you, of course, then you ask for a human person to talk to. Interestingly, in this area, there is a lot of growing interest, but most of the studies, most of the papers that you see are either conceptual or they're very descriptive. There's very little empirical studies on this topic. So I and my co-authors, we've started collecting data, and we're now writing papers on this topic. And I would encourage all of you to look at those who are interested in the role of technology to look at this topic. Especially, there is very little research on what are those unique, attributes of each of these technologies. How is artificial intelligence different from, let's say, self-checkout machines, or how is it different from blockchain? We so far we have clubbed all of these into one big area called emerging technologies. So there's a very little understanding of how these different features of these technologies can actually influence the different stages of the consumer decision-making process. So some of the topics that are emerging is they include how do customers use different types of new technologies, and how do these influence customer engagement and purchase behaviors, which has huge implications for the marketing companies. And what are some of those factors that may hinder or that may jeopardize the customer's journey to adopt new digital technologies, especially for their shopping experience? So we came out with some of these research questions. So for example, what are the unique attributes of various digital technologies, including artificial intelligence, virtual reality, even the internet? How does that compare with some of these new technologies and tools? And what are some of the commonalities and differences in the scores for these attributes across all the digital technologies? So basically, if you understand that some technologies are similar to each other and some are very different to the others, then you can develop some kind of common marketing strategies for your company. And also as researchers, then it's easier for you to understand the impact of those technologies. And then more importantly, not only what are these different attributes, but then how they interact with the consumer's demographic and behavioral characteristics. So there are some consumers, as I mentioned earlier, who are younger, relatively more educated, who don't mind using technology, whereas there are others who are probably more hesitant and more resistant. So how do these new technologies, how are they going to impact their shopping experience, their choice of products, brands, and technologies? Are they going to prefer those brands that offer them these technologies, or are they going to actually run away from them? So these are some really very interesting questions that we need to find answers to. And lastly, again, as I mentioned, so I'm along with my co-authors, we are looking at how do these different digital technologies and their attributes, they affect these different stages of consumer decision making. So for example, do these technologies play a more important role at the beginning of these, the decision-making process, or during the decision-making process? Like, for example, when you are searching for alternatives, or you're deciding whether you want to buy or not, or do these technologies play a role in the post-purchase, context, which is, when you're sharing your purchase details, you're taking pictures and sharing it on Instagram or Facebook or WhatsApp. So where, at what stage do these technologies play a more important role versus the other stages? So as I mentioned, we have already started doing some work on this topic. So here are some examples of that. So again, with my co-authors in UK, we presented a paper in the last year's AMA conference. These were some initial exploratory findings from our research. So if any of you are interested, you can email me later, and I'll be quite happy to share with you this paper and all our other details. Then we have two papers currently being prepared. So we are looking at the consumer decision making, as I mentioned, how these different technologies can influence the different stages of consumer decision making. So this paper is now ready. So we're going to submit it to Journal of Retailing and Consumer Services. And then lastly, we are looking at artificial intelligence in particular, because there's a lot of interest on the artificial intelligence, both the positives and the negatives of artificial intelligence. So as some of you may be aware, artificial intelligence can be very positive. It can, make our decision making more efficient, just like, self-service technologies. However, there is also a dark side, because it's shown that artificial intelligence can also be misused, or it can be abused, and it can be detrimental to the consumer rights by not letting them know, what is the decision-making, process that is going behind the scenes. Some of you, or many of you, may remember what happened with the last US presidential elections. So there was a company that was using the data from Facebook, and they were trying to customize the advertising that they were targeting those people to influence their voting behavior. So that's the kind of dark side that we are interested in also exploring. So we're trying to develop a comprehensive conceptual model which can guide future research in this area. So these are some of the things that are happening right now. I think I am almost done with my 30 minutes. So I will stop here, and I'll open the floor for any questions, suggestions. Please feel free. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. B, for the insights on self-service technology. Your short talk has actually given us so much knowledge on technologies, even the ones that we don't see them as technologies anymore, like you mentioned the self-checkout machines. I personally love them too. At the same time, I find it interesting that you mentioned that the retailers don't really trust us. And I guess the older generations have reasons not to trust technologies too. So to start us off, I would like to ask one question, which is, how are we going to encourage older generation to accept digitalization?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I wish I knew the answer, then I will be making millions of dollars, right? But just to share some ideas that I have, I'll tell you, I was 2 days ago, I was flying back from Sydney, and there were two Russian ladies sitting next to me. I had the aisle seat, and they were sitting on the window and the middle seat, and they both were using WhatsApp, and they had their mobile phones. They knew how to run videos from the Virgin Airlines software system. So I think it's a function of involvement level and the need of these consumers, and they were both in their 70s, and they were enjoying, they were laughing, and they were showing, even they were sharing with me, look at this, it's so funny. So I think marketers will need to find what is it that is of importance to these elderly customers. I'll give you another example. A lot of people who have family members living in other parts of the world, I find those elderly using WhatsApp like everybody else. because they find it's important for them, right? So I think that's what will happen. Those services which are useful to them, like online shopping and others, so there will be apps that will make it easier for them, with probably someone assisting them in case something goes wrong. I think that would be the solution.
Thank you, Profi. I would like to invite the audience to come forward if you have a question. Profi, we have one more question.
Hi, Prof. Thank you so much for your enlightening talk. I enjoyed it very much. I'd just like to ask you for your opinion on the use of SST in sustainability measures. So, for example, maybe the use of SST in looking for recycling centers. Based on your experience in Australia, do you see an emerging trend for this? Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think I haven't seen it, but I think there is talk. As you know, we have these multiple bins. When I came to Australia many years ago, there used to be just one bin. Then it became 2 bins and 3 and 4, and now we have 5 or 6 bins for different kinds of items to recycle. I've heard that there is a talk of putting some sensors on these bins, so that those sensors can then can give you an idea of what's inside that bin, and are there any chemical reactions happening and so on. So which I think will then tell you that that bin needs to be emptied quickly. And also the data can actually be collected by the municipal, the central, the city councils. So I've heard about that as far as recycling is concerned. But I'm sure there will be many more applications, especially with the circular economy and the social enterprise. These are very emerging, growing trends. So I think self-service technology definitely will play, and also these new emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and Internet of Things. I think they're going to play an increasingly big role.
Thank you, Profi. Do we have any more questions from the audience? Yes, we have one. Please state, come forward. And please state your name and where you're from, so that Profi knows who he's talking to. Oh, by the way, Prof, my name is Aini. I don't think I introduced myself. I forgot to do that. I'm the MC further.
Hi, Prof. Sharma. I'm Mahia from Canada National. I've got a student who's doing chatbot as her research thesis, and I just want to ask on this matter because I'm from the elderly generation. Technology has never been kind to me. It's frustrating to inquire or complain using SST since it is rather basic. Okay. So how to humanize this technology during the interface?
Yeah, again, I mean, these are really good questions. I wish I know the answers. I can start a company or a business, to solve these problems. All I can say is, one has to look at, how these chatbots are designed and how they are implemented. So I don't know if many of you are aware of the gap model in services. So those who teach services marketing, you would know, the gap model. So basically, gap model says that, you need to really understand what your customers need and what their expectations are. Otherwise, whatever system that you design, it's not going to work, because, then you will have repeated failures. So I have a feeling, again, after talking to a number of these software designers and others, and I can understand because I started my life as an engineer. A lot of times they don't really get customer feedback during the design stage. And that, I think, is the reason why many of these solutions fail. So it would be interesting to do a pilot study with the actual elderly customers and show them the software tool. So, all of you may have heard about the idea of co-design and co-creation. So I think many of these self-service technologies, they need to be co-designed with the users, so that, you can identify those challenges right at the stage of developing these technologies, rather than you first. So most of these guys, most of these software engineers, they're young, they're 21, 22, 25. So they don't really see things like an elderly person. So it might be a good idea to actually have some elderly consumers on a panel maybe in a group discussion or a focus group when they are developing this technology. So I'll give you one example of this technology. So in Australia, because drunk driving is a major issue, so what they have done is they have developed a technology. It's a simulator. It's a driving simulator. And what it does, it simulates drunk driving. So, so when you're driving on that simulator, suddenly you lose control. The car starts misbehaving. And this is done in a lab. So, there is no actual accident or anything. And they're teaching this to the young students. When they're in high schools, they're actually taking them and putting them on that simulator to make them experience how bad drunk driving is. So, and I think that's a very good use of technology. So maybe, these, IT companies or software, companies, they can have some elderlies and, they can design their services in such a way that it can be probably made more suitable for them.
Thank you, Prof. That was very good answer, and very helpful. Do we have any more questions from the audience?
How about people who are online? Do they have any questions?
Are we monitoring the people online? No, they also don't have any questions. We are actually not monitoring the people online.
Okay.
Okay, we have one more question. Can I say this is the last one, the last question?
Yeah, please go ahead. We still have time.
Hi, Dr. P, Prof. P. I'm Azreen. My question is there any concerns between cybersecurity and SST that you can foresee?
Cybersecurity and SST?
Cybersecurity, for example, there's a lot of hackers nowadays.
Yeah.
That you might foresee and consider that it's going to cross over to SST as well. That's all.
Yeah, look, I mean, cybersecurity is a threat everywhere, right? So wherever you have, you're using internet and, you're connecting to the outside world, there is obviously, threat to your privacy, threat to your data. So I think a lot of customer education is required because these days we can't live without technology, right? So, I have many friends who have closed down their Facebook accounts. And, there are many people who don't use WhatsApp. In fact, there are many people who don't use emails still. And the reason is because they're afraid of, data leakages and loss of their private data, etc. But I think that's an extreme reaction. A lot of these technologies are pretty safe, but they do have, cyber attacks and so on. So luckily for a lot of these self-service technology machines, they are not hooked up to the internet. They are connected to the intranet. So a lot of these companies, they have built, their own security systems. So they don't, so when you're scanning items in a supermarket, you're not connected to the internet, right? So you're on the company's intranet. So to that extent, I think it's still safe. But you never know. I mean, when you're doing online shopping, there are many other situations where essentially you need to look at, maybe don't go to those dodgy websites, right? I mean, maybe you can only go to those reliable, trustworthy websites and look for their security, settings. Make sure that your own security settings are good and you have good, protection on your laptops and your devices. I think that's probably the best way to deal with this issue.
You made a good point, Prof. You can be brought anywhere actually, but it's good to know that the SST is quite safe. Okay, I believe we come to the end of the session. Thank you, Prof. Sharma, for joining us today from Australia. Please join me to give him a Thank you so much, Prof. Okay, I'll see you next time.
Yeah. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, we have come to the moment that our presenters are waiting for. I think they've been preparing this all probably all of last week till today. All right, so we have come to that point now. I would like to hand this session to Dr. Yvonne S.M. Ang, the moderator for the live paper presentation, session 1. Dr. Yvonne, the floor is yours now.